Hello and welcome back. I'm so happy that you're here with us today as we continue in our study of the book of Philippians. Last week we looked at our introduction and saw how Paul was writing to the church in Philippi from prison in Rome. He was in prison awaiting an audience with the Emperor Nero, and he didn't know how this was going to turn out. And so he wrote this letter to the Philippians as well as the other prison epistles. Remember, that's Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. We're looking at chapter 1 today, and time doesn't allow us to go into any in-depth study of these sections, but we're going to be looking at just one part of chapter 1, verses 21 through to 24. Notice, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I am to live on in the flesh, this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which to choose. But I am hard pressed from both directions, having a desire to depart and be with Christ, for that is very much better. Yet to remain on in the flesh is more necessary for your sake." We see here Paul has a dilemma. He says, for me to live is Christ, but to die is gain. Now, if he continued to live, he could see he had much work to do for Christ. But on the other hand, if things went the other way and he was to die, well, that was a gain for him. You see, death had no fear for the Apostle Paul, because he remembered what Jesus said. Now, in Revelation chapter 2, verse 10, it tells us, "Be faithful until death, and you shall receive the crown of life." He knew that there was a reward waiting for him. Also, in the book of John, in chapter 14, notice what we read there in verses 2 and 3. "In my Father's house are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. For I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." You see, Jesus made it very clear, and I'm sure this is what Paul was thinking as he was pondering and writing this letter. Jesus said there is a dwelling place prepared for us, and we will go to be with him forever. What we have to do, remember what we read in Revelation 2, verse 10, we have to be faithful until death. So we see Paul's dilemma. For me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. Verse 22. But if I am to live on in the flesh, this will mean fruitful labor for me, and I do not know which to choose. Paul had work to do. He knew he had work to do. I find this fascinating, that Paul recognized, even though he was in prison, for many people this would slow down their work, stop their work. But not so Paul. He saw he had much to do. And this letter is evidence of that work that he is doing. Verse 23, "But I am hard pressed from both directions, having a desire to be with Christ, for that is very much better." You know, death carries no fear for a Christian who knows and loves the Lord, because we know that to be with Christ is very much better. That is our reward. But the point that Paul is making here is that there's still things that we have to do. Verse 24, "Yet to remain on in the flesh is more necessary for your sake." Now, this is a classic example of Paul putting others before himself. In chapter 2, we'll see this in great detail. In chapter 2, verse 3, it says, "Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind regard one another as more important than yourselves." So what he's doing in this passage in chapter 1, to remain on the flesh is more necessary for your sake. He's putting the Philippians and the other Christians first. What a wonderful example this is. You know, we live this life, and there's so many things going on, but really, we need to focus on those things that are important. Serving the Lord is our number one priority in this life, putting God first. But next is serving others. We come below that. God, others, self. And this is what we see here. Paul didn't know whether he was going to be condemned to death, but that was okay for him. That was his reward. But if he remained on in the flesh, there was much work for him to do. Well, as we go on in this study, I hope you gain a great deal. I certainly enjoy sharing this with you. Come back to be with us next time. Thank you for your time, and goodbye for now.